My name is Richard Parker and I'm a Program Director at Mount Eliza Executive Education, part of Melbourne Business School. My interest is in financial management and in particular how the operational decisions and strategy decisions and marketing decisions made in organisations have an impact on the financial outcomes of a business. And people I work with and see here at Mount Eliza Business School come from lots of different backgrounds, typically not finance though. So they bring with them lots of expertise about marketing, operations, strategy, and often don't really understand how the impact of their decisions has an effect on the outcomes financially of a business overall. So we're going to take a journey, and my journey is going to involve Woolworths. I'll be telling the Woolworths story, and I'll be using accounting data and information to try and tell the financial story of Woolworths and build up an economic model that can link the operational, marketing and strategy decisions together. The story of Woolworths is not any different than any other organisation because there's only one story in terms of economics. The economic model of a business is always the same. Owners invest initially equity in a business with the hope of getting some financial return. And the financial return is either in the form of capital gain, so that the size of their investment in the business grows, and along the way they'd like some compensation for the risks they're taking in the form of a dividend. The outcomes of the business, regardless of whether it's public sector, private sector, owned by the government, owned by individuals, a private or a public company, will always be the same. They're generally to maximise the amount of dividend that can come out of that business. When we look at the business commencement, the first thing that happens is that investors will put in their own money, put it at risk with the hope of making a return. And the return that they get is dependent on how well the business is managed. When economists and accountants think about this and talk about it, they call this equity. So the initial start of a business is always equity. And the amount of equity that goes into a business as the initial investment determines how much asset the business has got initially to get started. Beyond that, businesses typically need to borrow more from other sources. The amount of equity invested isn't usually large enough for the business to acquire the assets that the business needs. So generally, liabilities or debt is put on top of the equity that's been raised from shareholders to pool the assets to a larger degree. The assets themselves aren't virtuous. They're only there for the need to produce something. And the thing that needs to be produced is revenue that will come out of these assets. You might have recognised that the picture we've built up so far, the combination of liabilities and debt to give us a pool of assets available, is a balance sheet story. And a balance sheet is that showing the position of a business at any point in time based on who's made the contribution, who's taken the financial risks in debt and equity, and what asset pool has been put together using the funds that they've got. The reason a balance sheet balances is because a business comes into this world with nothing. It has no assets at all, and it's dependent upon the owners to put funds up in order to acquire the assets. And beyond that, other investors and stakeholders, typically debt investors, will also put their funds in to make the asset pool grow larger. Because a business can't produce assets out of nothing, can't produce assets out of thin air, then the amount of asset is entirely dependent upon how much liability and how much equity has been raised. So we get this balance between the two things. A balance sheet can never go out of balance because we can't create more assets than what we've got funding sources to provide.